George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, and it's live from Rochdale. Get used to it. As the voters prepare tomorrow to send a humiliating message to the big two parties, Conservative and Labour, in one of the most significant political by-election contests in many decades. And Joe Biden gets licked in Michigan. Whilst licking a cone, 104,000 of his hardcore supporters declare that they are now uncommitted as far as Joe Biden is concerned. There's nothing to lick, drink, or eat in the Gaza Strip. A parachute drop of vitally needed food and other supplies is dropped into the sea by, amongst other countries, Egypt, which has a perfectly serviceable gate that it could have just opened and driven the aid through. What's going on in the Middle East? We'll be talking to some of the most authoritative voices anywhere in the world on that subject. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Well, the polls open at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. By 10 o'clock they close, but within a couple of hours we should have an indication of the result. According to the bookmakers and according to my political nose, honed over 50 years in active frontline politics, short sword fighting in the cause of justice, I'd say we are going to win. Moreover, that the Labour Party and the Conservative Party, the two big parties of the state, are going to be utterly humiliated at the polls. Of course, they're still the two contenders for power in Britain, but that's because no one with the credibility to win, the expectation that they might win, ever stands against them. But that is about to change. There will be many consequences if I'm elected here in Rochdale tomorrow. One of them will be a knocking of the knees at Westminster amongst the establishment politicians in the ironclad consensus for war on both sides of the parliamentary aisle. The Uni Party, the two cheeks of the same backside, they are going to be clenching those two cheeks rather nervously as I come through those swing doors. But more importantly than that, it will be a spark that will set very dry tinder alight all over this region of the northwest of England, through the Midlands, in particular the West Midlands, particularly the city of Birmingham. It will spread in East London from Ilford all the way to Bethnal Green and Bow. It will put Labour on notice that they have lost, maybe forever, the support which generations of voters gave them, whose mothers and fathers always voted Labour, whose grandmothers and grandfathers always voted Labour. Starmer has burnt it all. He's blown it. He will never be trusted. There's never a glad, confident morning again for Keir Starmer outside of the Guardian reading Liberal bubble. Labour is hated. Sure, if it's a choice between Labour and the Conservatives, many, but by no means as many as it used to be, will vote Labour rather than Conservative. But when it is not a straight fight between those two, when there are credible independent candidates, as there are going to be, when there are credible Workers' Party candidates, as there are going to be, then all over the country, they'll look to what happened in Rochdale tomorrow, the 29th of February, a leap year. They'll see it as a great leap forward. We are in the business here in this town, 20 minutes from the metropolis of Manchester, of leading a Rochdale revival. In 1844, 180 years ago, the cooperative movement was born in a tiny lane called Toad Lane. You need to visit it. I hope many people will come and visit me in Rochdale over these next 5 years that I hope to represent the town. I've been in cooperatives, in the favelas in Brazil, in the townships of South Africa, all over the world. There are cooperatives, and it all started here. The people who started it are known as the Rochdale Pioneers, and we intend that this town should forever be associated both with them and the pioneers that returned the working class people of this country to a path that can lead to their salvation. Labour is done, finished, defunct, just like the Liberals were more than 100 years ago, when the working class decided that the Liberals no longer represented their interests and that they needed a party to represent them and their interests, entire and separate from the bourgeois interests that the Liberal Party then tried to straddle. The pioneers will never be forgotten of 1844, the pioneers that will be out in their thousands tomorrow voting for a new direction for working class people in Britain, I hope will never be forgotten either. But we'll tell you more and all about it on Sunday on the show at 7 p.m. UK time. I saw a picture, a video of Joe Biden licking ice cream in an ice creamier, declaring that there's going to be a ceasefire in Gaza on Monday. There he is on your screen. Leave aside the crass, grotesque idea of a president eating ice cream whilst talking about a ceasefire in a conflict that has already cost the blood and lives of well over 100,000 people in 135 days. Leave that optic aside. He was lying. He was lying to fool the voters in Michigan that some end was in sight for the torture, the crucifixion of the Palestinian people in the Holy Land. It was a lie, a self-serving lie, but it didn't stop 104,000 people not staying at home. Hundreds of thousands more stayed at home, but 104,000 went to the ballot box and wrote their X on the box marked uncommitted. What does it mean? I'll tell you what it means. It means that Joe Biden now cannot win the state of Michigan, and no Democratic presidential candidate can possibly win a presidential election when they don't win Michigan. Look it up and tell me if I am wrong. The reason is that the people of Michigan's settled will is like the settled will of millions of Americans, that this Holocaust, with a small h, but a Holocaust nonetheless, that has taken place over these last 4 months, is entirely the responsibility of Joe Biden's ironclad alliance with the killer, the baby killer, Benjamin Netanyahu. Sure, he briefs from time to time that he's angry with Netanyahu, that Netanyahu is an a-hole, that Netanyahu doesn't listen. Joe Biden, with one telephone call, could have stopped this 100,000 lives ago. He could have stopped it with one call. If he told Netanyahu, not another dollar, not another bomb, not another rocket, not another veto in the United Nations Security Council, you'll be boycotted, sanctioned, disinvested, cast into the perdition that apartheid South Africa was cast, then the thousands, scores of thousands of little children and their mothers who have been slaughtered could have been averted. This is the Joe Biden that claims he's pro-life. This is the Joe Biden that claims he's a practicing Roman Catholic. This is the Joe Biden that claims he's a Christian. Yet he has facilitated a slaughter of the innocents of which Herod himself would be ashamed. I don't know how much longer Joe Biden has this mortal coil. I don't know how much longer any of us have on this earth in this life. But I'm willing to bet that Biden will burn in hell, in the hottest fires of hell, for his role in burning all these children, burning all these mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters. I damn him. God damn him. I say, lesser of two evils, you're having a laugh. This man is Satan himself, walking around, doddering around, staggering around, losing his way, even on the way to the bathroom in the White House itself. I despise Joe Biden for the same reason that Malcolm X, whose 59th death anniversary we marked just a couple of days ago, when Malcolm described the difference between the wolf and the fox. Let's call the wolf the Republican Party. Let's call the fox the Democratic Party. In the UK, Tory and Labour. When the wolf is coming towards you, you know exactly what's in his mind and what his intentions are. But the fox comes amongst you looking as if it's smiling, but its purpose is exactly the same. That's why I despise Starmer more than little Sunak, the inky-fingered clerk of empire, who once upon a time would have been doing the numbers for the empire in East Africa or a part of the empire, maybe far distant. This little runt, Sunak, he'll be gone soon. We all know who he represents, what his interests are. The problem is Starmer is the fox. Biden is the fox, pretending to be on the side of the working people, pretend of all the things they claimed that Donald Trump would have done. Joe Biden has done them all and much more than Trump would have done, but smiling like a fox all the while. The situation this week in Gaza is simply catastrophic. The numbers of people still being slaughtered every day by rocket and shell is in the hundreds every week, massacred. I had a journalist in here 5 minutes ago. I can just imagine what he's going to write in the paper tomorrow, challenging me when I said that what's happening in Gaza is a Holocaust with a small h. Really? You think it's a Holocaust? You're comparing it to a Holocaust? I'll tell you this, Israel has killed more children more quickly than even the beasts of fascism killed in the Holocaust. Do the maths. The rate of killing of children in this 135 days is worse than the Holocaust with a capital H. And it's the fact that none of our journalists, none of our politicians have even begun to contemplate that. That is the reason for the horror that they keep expressing at the hundreds of thousands, millions out on the street, most of them not Muslims, most of them white British people, many of them Jews, on the streets of this country every night, every weekend, protesting this Holocaust, this massacre, this genocide of the innocents that is taking place in Gaza. Of course, I could say a lot, but it wouldn't be diplomatic of me to say it about the Arab countries and the pitiable, pitiful, pusillanimous, pathetic response of the Arab governments to this challenge to their own people, their own Arab nation, this challenge to their own co-religionists, the people who pray like them, fast like them, worship the same God as them, from the same book as them. They haven't lifted one finger to stop it. Haven't lifted one finger to come to the aid of the Palestinian people in their agony, on their Calvary, on the cross in the Holy Land. But there are different circles of hell. The hottest must be reserved for the dictatorship of General Sisi in Egypt. It was not my intention to focus on him for a variety of geopolitical reasons. But when I saw him sending aeroplanes from his own territory into Gaza, which is a distance of 50 yards, and dropping aid on a parachute into the sea, and when I saw thousands of refugees wading out into the waves to try and recover it, I couldn't help but remember from my many times going through it that there is a perfectly serviceable door, gate, that he could just have opened and allowed the thousands of trucks full of aid, full of food, to drive through the gate rather than wade into the Mediterranean in order to recover a tiny amount of the urgently needed aid, for the lack of which people are dying. And dropping it in the south of Gaza doesn't help the people who are literally starving to death in the north of Gaza, that are falling down in front of our eyes and dying of hunger, whilst enough food to feed them all is on the road through that gate in Egyptian territory. People say to me, well, what can Sisi do? What can Egypt do? I put it a different way. What would Israel do if you opened the gates and started bringing food and medicine into the Gaza Strip? Would they attack you? That wouldn't be a good look. And they didn't shoot down your plane with your parachute drop, did they? It's time to step up the response before the Palestinians begin dying in their hundreds of thousands of famine, pestilence, disease. There's no time to lose. There's no time for diplomatic nicety any longer. Let Russia, China, South Africa, Brazil, let them send ships now to the coast. What's Israel going to do? Practically friendless in the world as it now is, sink a Chinese aid ship? I don't think so. But even if it did, it's time to step up our rejection of genocide The International Court of Justice has already found Israel plausibly guilty of acts of genocide. That's what a Holocaust is, by the way, a genocide. A country on trial for genocide continues to enjoy the political, military, intelligence, diplomatic, and above all, propaganda support of a tiny number of Western countries that unfortunately most of you are living in. We've got Chris Hedges coming up next. You think I spoke powerfully? Wait till you hear him. Chris Hedges. Stay tuned.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They are nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting, the victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, we've got a quiz running. Will George Galloway win the Rochdale by-election? I suppose I've given you the answer to that. As far as I can see, I'd say yes, but you can have your say. You can vote on my Telegram, t.me/George Galloway. You can vote on my Twitter, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Get your votes in now. Let's have a big number, a big opinion poll. If you're in the US or Canada and want to call the show, it's +1 844 944 3344, toll free, of course. If you're in the UK or Ireland, again, free of charge, it's 08081965522. And the worldwide number I'm not able to read on my computer right at this minute. Now, to call Chris Hedges a political commentator is a bit like saying Ronaldo is a footballer. Chris Hedges is a supreme political commentator, journalist, writer, and host of the excellent Chris Hedges Report. And it's a privilege, as always, to welcome him onto the mother of all talk shows. Chris, thank you for joining us again. I don't know if you heard my monologue, but I summarized the situation of the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, the pathetic nature of the Arab government response, and the extent to which none of this would be happening if it were not for Joe Biden. How do you feel about those areas yourself?
Well, the only significant response to the genocide comes from Yemen. The rest of the Arab world is either silent at best or complicit. Certainly Egypt is complicit. It's in the process of building an alternative open-air prison for the Palestinians as they are pushed out of the open-air prison built by the Israelis in Gaza. Yeah, it's very, very cynical. I don't think it plays very well on the Arab street. I was just in Doha and just in Egypt not too long ago. But yeah, a government like, especially the Egyptian government, is very hostile to Hamas. Of course, they crushed, the Sisi government crushed the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas comes out of the Muslim Brotherhood, but it's very, very cynical. I heard in your monologue this kind of ridiculous dog and pony show of dropping a few supplies into the sea. Of course, they could come through the gates of Rafah. They won't. And Joe Biden, this genocide would not have gone on as long as it has and would not be sustained but for Washington. They have sent hundreds of millions of dollars of munitions because the Israelis are bombing. I remember I was in Sarajevo during the war. I think you were in Bosnia too, but I was in Sarajevo during the war. So that was 300 to 400 shells a day. And that resulted in about 4 to 5 dead a day, about 24 wounded a day. Well, compare that with Gaza. That's hundreds of dead and wounded a day. The bombing, and I don't pretend that Sarajevo was easy. I still have nightmares about it, but it's nothing compared to Gaza. I mean, we haven't seen anything, a bombing campaign of this level. You'd have to go back to Vietnam or maybe to Stalingrad or something where the Germans destroyed 70% of the buildings in Stalingrad. I mean, that's the level the Israelis are reaching at. The plan is clear. It's open. It is to create a humanitarian crisis of such catastrophic proportions, infectious diseases, starvation, not to mention, of course, now the last hospital is shut down. There's no medical care, no infrastructure, no clean water. People are sleeping out in the open. The idea is to create a crisis that is so extreme that the Palestinians, many at what point, 1.2 million, 1.4 million or something, now pushed up against the border of Egypt around Rafah, have a choice between death and exile, ethnic cleansing. And cutting off this money to UNRWA, of course, is almost unfathomable because, of course, it's aiding the starvation that is part of being weaponized by Israel in this genocide. In the United States, the UK, all these governments are complicit.
You know, the building of an open-air prison will merely transfer the problem by a few hundred yards. All the existing crises, multiple, will then exist on Egyptian soil. The resistance will be amongst the refugees that are driven out. Certainly the children, surviving children of the resistance, will grow up there to be a part of a new resistance. Nothing will be solved at all by driving the Palestinian population out of Gaza, merely transferred and only a few hundred yards.
Yeah, and that's initially why Sisi didn't want. You remember when Blinken first went to the Middle East, and Blinken is just a bag carrier for the Netanyahu government, he made a sweep through the Arab world and proposed that Arab governments take quotas, numbers. I think Egypt was 1.1 million Palestinians and, 700,000 in Iraq or something. Of course, roundly rejected for all of the reasons you just cited. But the Egyptian government is very pliable because its economy is a disaster. It's, I think, $161 billion or something in debt. And the United States is capable of buying it off. I don't know how else to explain the construction that is now being put up around Gaza. It's certainly not what they say it is for trucks. It doesn't make any sense. It's completely out in the open. We're watching it. But you're right. You've traumatized an entire generation. How do you think they're going to react? How would we react? And that will mean that there will be cross-border raids, and Israel, if these Gazans are trapped in the Sinai, then this conflict not only will it go on in perpetuity for another generation, but you're right, it will, of course, involve Egypt. So the whole thing is a complete catastrophic mess, and I really blame Washington. Washington has the ability to pull the plug on this today with a phone call. The Israelis cannot sustain this without U.S. support. But the people running our policies in the Middle East out of the Biden White House essentially don't have a clue as to what they're doing. Jake Sullivan, Brett McGurk, and Blinken, who sees Sullivan and McGurk have no real experience. McGurk was in Iraq, and he was just a disaster. They don't speak Arabic. They don't know the Arab world. They don't understand the history, culturally, linguistically illiterate. So everything is seen through the prism of Israel. And I think there's a pretty healthy dose of racism and bigotry and Islamophobia that go along with it. And there is a certain disquiet, by the way, among the Arabists, both in the State Department and in the intelligence services, because they realize that this is just being incredibly mishandled. And you have seen junior government officials in USAID headed by Samantha Power, in the irony of that, of course, Miss Genocide with a Problem from Hell book. But in the State Department and in the executive branch, there have been pretty severe protests. And I think it's not just protests over the genocide, but over what I would call gross incompetence.
On the mention of Power, she tweeted today that she had entered Israel across the Allenby Bridge in Jordan, thus at a stroke, linguistically at least, wiping out the fact that the West Bank is officially, legally, Palestinian occupied territory. She actually said, I've just stepped into Israel across the Allenby Bridge. Is this illiteracy, or does it have a wider meaning, by which I mean this? After Gaza, is it the West Bank?
I think that's certainly the intent. I mean, the intent of the Netanyahu government is clear and has been clear for some time. That is to ethnically cleanse, drive out the 2.2, 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza and turn on the West Bank. These are heirs of the radical fascistic Rabbi Meir Kahane, who I covered and knew in Jerusalem. I don't think liberal Zionism, was just as brutal as to Palestinians, but this religious Zionism is kind of messianic, cruder, and more open about their intent, perhaps, than liberal Zionism. So yes, they would like to, quote unquote, cleanse. Samantha Power, I knew her in Bosnia. She was a freelance reporter when I was the New York Times bureau chief there. Yeah, she knows exactly what she is doing. She's a consummate careerist. She is, and has been since the Obama administration, she caters to the Israel lobby because she knows to run afoul of the Israel lobby, and Israel is detrimental to her career. She wants to be Secretary of State, of course, one day. So, yeah, she knew precisely what she was saying, and she was pleasing her Israeli host. So, these people have no moral core at all.
Let's return then to Washington, or more particularly to Michigan. What's your take on what happened in the primary last night, where 104,000 people voted uncommitted on a coronation ballot for Joe Biden?
Well, that's a sign of how dangerous it is, because remember, they were only trying to get 10,000. So they got 10 times that number. Biden's in serious trouble for many reasons, including Gaza. But what does Bibi Netanyahu care? He prefers Trump. He's quite willing to sacrifice Biden. He has no interest in propping up Biden. He don't even like Biden, really. So it's all good. It's all good for Bibi. But yeah, he's in serious trouble. The base is, the youth vote, the Arab American vote, which is significant in Michigan. Of course, I live in New Jersey, which has the second largest Arab American community in the country. They are not going to vote for Biden. They are not going to do it. So, and it's such a slim margin that he has to win, because both sides are kind of essentially struggling over that uncommitted vote. So I think he's in real political trouble. And I think that Michigan is an indication of that.
What about Zion Don? What's he saying? We don't see over here much of what he's saying on the subject, although we know his history, and we know the history of his son-in-law in particular. Is there any daylight between Trump's view on what's happening in Gaza and Joe Biden's?
No, I think for a Palestinian, it wouldn't make any difference. Remember, Biden, after Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem in violation of international law, Biden didn't move it back. The Democratic leadership, Chuck Schumer, they all supported the move to Jerusalem. No, I think that in terms of, I think the Biden administration, especially with Blinken, has been utterly obsequious to Netanyahu, not just running cover for them at the United Nations by canceling ceasefire agreements, but by making sure they have a steady supply of munitions. I think they ship a lot of it, as does the UK, to Cyprus, and then they fly it by transport helicopters. It was about a 40-minute flight or something into Tel Aviv. Because the Israelis, the level of munitions that they're going through on a daily basis is so staggering. They need American stockpiles, and they get it. They get it from Trump. They get it from Biden. It won't make any difference.
Finally, Chris, a slight change of subject, though not entirely. It's 2 years on in the NATO proxy war against Russia. Any sign of the U.S. administration beginning to prepare the public for inevitable defeat of their project? And what is Trump saying about that now?
Well, the way they prepare for the defeat is the same way they prepared for the defeat in Afghanistan, which is they stop talking about it and the press stops covering it. You hardly know it's there. So yes, they are preparing. Of course, everything negotiated settlement they could have gotten before the war. They didn't. And I just want to say, by the way, the whole argument that somehow the West would not allow the nationalist Ukrainian government to carry out ethnic cleansing and campaigns of genocide in the Donbass is kind of exposed, by the way, with Gaza. You see precisely how we react. So they're just a small caveat, but there's that lie that they were telling. I mean, the U.S. achieved its goals. What were its goals? To isolate Putin from Europe and to degrade the Russian military. And of course, they very cynically made the Ukrainians pay. The friend of mine was in Ukraine. He said they're all recruiting 40-year-old guys. They don't want to go. It's just been a complete disaster. It's destroyed huge swaths of the country, but the United States doesn't care. I covered proxy wars for much of my career as a foreign correspondent. So yes, they'll abandon the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians will essentially have to engage in a land for peace settlement. That all could have been done before. And it wasn't. It wasn't in the U.S. interest to do it. But it wasn't in the Ukrainian interest to believe that the American empire, the American government was ever really ultimately on their side. This was all about Russia, and it was all about isolating Putin. And they've done that. That's their goal, and they've achieved it.
And Trump, is he still promising to finish it all before he's even inaugurated?
In Ukraine? I mean, the Republicans have been the only serious opposition to funding Ukraine. The Democratic Party in the United States is the war party now. So, yeah, there is significant opposition. And the American public is tired of it, too. I mean, the whole country's collapsing, the infrastructure's collapsing. Despite the kind of glowing statistics about employment, most people are living at a struggling to sustain their households. There's a deep, deep disquiet. Biden has not addressed these issues. That is, of course, fueling Trump. I mean, the polls, they go back and forth, but oftentimes Trump is ahead. There's no enthusiasm for Biden at all. But yeah, they'll pull the plug. I mean, if the Democrats win, it may take a little longer, but it's over. I mean, they're going to pull the plug eventually.
Where and when can people see the Chris Hedges report?
chrishedges.substack.com. So it's put out by the Real News, but everything comes up on the Substack.
Fabulous. Chris, thanks for joining us. As always, been a pleasure.
Thanks, George.
Will somebody called George Galloway win the Rochdale by-election, yes or no? Get your vote in now. I have no idea what the votes are so far. I don't know if I'm ahead or not. If you're in the US or Canada, +1 844 944 3344, toll free. If you're in the UK or Ireland, 0808 196 5522, again, free of charge. Let me take a quick break, and then I've got to look forward to the one and only Bryce Greene and Richard Medhurst. It's going to be a great show tonight. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq War. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
You can watch my films, The Killings of Tony Blair and Killing Kelly, free of charge if you support me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. I really need your help with that to support my work. It'll cost you less than the price of a cup of tea per week in an insalubrious cafe. Not that you'd be found dead in an insalubrious cafe, I know. So 18,600 people have voted on the poll so far. Please get voting on that. And the podcast has gone through the roof. Now, I'm not, how shall I put it, a habitué of the podcast world, but I know success when I see one. We're in the charts and at the top of the charts in multiple countries with this podcast. And I'm told by the clever people behind the glass that all you have to do is point your phone at that QR code right now and you will find yourself at this award-winning podcast. In fact, you can get all 321 episodes of the podcast on there. Let's go to Terence in Norwich. Terence, welcome back.
Good evening, Mr. Galloway, and I'll have to start immediately by saying I know you have no ego, you're like myself, and I want to wish you all the very best when you become MP for Rochdale, because they will not get a better Member of Parliament. You've done it before, you've been there, you've got the T-shirt, and may I just wish you to keep carrying the loudest whisper with you, the truth, and embarrass that the mother of all parliaments, my backside. I just want you to get in there and just they are beyond embarrassment. But good luck, Mr. Galloway. Really, I really mean that.
Thank you, Terence. I'm very much obliged to you. It's very kind. Thank you. I'm touched. Latifa is on the line from London. Latifa, welcome.
أهلا السلام عليكم خويا جورج السلام ورحمة الله.
Walaikum salam. How are you, madam?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. First of all, I just wanted to thank you very, very much for all the good work you've been doing for decades. And may the Almighty protect you and keep on going, please. And I wish you all the best for tomorrow.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. As many people, I am more than distressed with what's happening to Palestine and just madness. I have so many points to go, but I'll just try to stick to just two for tonight. First of all, I want to send a big, I don't know, there is no, I'm speechless what to say to our brothers and sisters in Palestine, especially in Gaza. My heart goes out for them every day, and I cry, I cannot sleep, I cannot eat. It's just unbelievable what's happening, just unbelievable. I'll just try and go on to my points. To be honest with you, I echo every little word you say in your introduction, and I don't care what anybody says. I am you're one of my heroes, together with Tony Benn, may the Almighty bless his soul, and Jeremy Corbyn, and Ilan Pape. Mr. Ilan Pape, I'm like him. I just think that the only solution is one solution. Nobody wants to have a country like Zionist country next to them, and just unbelievable. I just want to remember our people, Muslim and every good person in the world, about the boycott. It's the only way they can feel it. His boycott all the cars, Mercedeses, and our Arab people, how they are in the West and in the Western world. They're actually the engine of the economy of the Western world, but absolutely disappointed in that way. But with your permission, Khoya George, can I please read part of the Quran to all our brothers and sisters and all the good people in the world? Do you mind? It's quite short.
No, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها يومئذ يصدر الناس أشتاتا ليروا أعمالهم فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خيرا يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شرا يره. This is, of course, especially for my Muslims that understand the Quran. So, at the end of the day, everybody is going to be judged for their own. So, you cannot hide away from God. Yeah. So that's what keeping me saying.
Judge yourself before you are judged. Judge yourself before you are judged. Latifa, I can feel the power of your emotion in that call. Thank you for making it. Rafiq is in New York on Rochdale. I told you, it's a global university of the airwaves. Go ahead, Rafiq.
It is indeed, George. It's a privilege to support you on Patreon, and I encourage others to do so likewise. George, one campaigns in poetry. Okay, George, I got it written down. One campaigns in poetry, but governs in prose, to quote a former governor of New York. So, this is to the good people of Rochdale. It'll only take a minute, so bear with me, please. To the people of Rochdale, I am a Kashmiri American, but Palestine lives in me. I urge you to vote for George Galloway. Let his fearless voice again resound in Parliament for justice in Palestine, as well as for the contextual historical struggle in Kashmir, the world's most militarized place. George Galloway has the political savvy to persuade even the steeliest men in New Delhi to free from India's jails the best minds of our generation. For instance, Khurram Parvez, a noted member of civil society who had been gathering evidence about mass graves for presentation to the International Criminal Court. For instance, Shabir Shah, behind bars now for 35 years for demanding the right to self-determination. Two good souls, among many others, in jail, hundreds of miles away from their families. Oh, people of Rochdale, a vote for George Galloway is a vote for the half-widows of Kashmir who do not know if their husbands are alive or dead. A vote for George Galloway is a vote to expose the Israeli model of land grab underway in Kashmir. A vote for George Galloway is a vote for hundreds of boys and girls deliberately blinded by pellet guns used in Kashmir by India's military. Oh, people of Rochdale, give your hearts to George Galloway, and he will give you his ears. And his extraordinary clarion call for dignity will again rock Parliament and echo across the sea. The best is yet to be. The moment for action is now. Nasr min Allah wa fatihan qareeb. Victory is from Allah and conquest is near. Thank you.
God bless you, Rafiq. All the way from New York, Kashmir, via New York to Rochdale on the mother of all talk shows. I'm very grateful to you indeed. Another old mucker of mine is Tommy in Glasgow. He's a legend. Here he is. Go on yourself, Tom.
You're a legend. Salam alaikum, brother. How you doing?
Walaikum salam. By the grace of God, I'm in great spirits.
Yes, indeed, indeed. As you prepare to take your places, being the foremost politician of your era, I mean, how many places have you stood, George? Your victory tomorrow, Hasta Victoria Sempre. God bless, brother, for tomorrow.
I will, yeah. Thank you, Tom.
How many will this be? How many will this be? Tell us, brother.
If elected, it will be my 5th constituency in 4 different towns and cities, a record matched only by Winston Churchill. And I'm not finished yet. Go on yourself, Tom.
Better than him. Far better than him, if I may say so. And for the people of Rochdale, people of Rochdale, this is a chance for history for you. I mean, I don't say in a bad way, it's a nondescript town. Glasgow's a nondescript town. But it's the people that make Glasgow. It's the people that make Rochdale. The people of Rochdale, if there's one person there who's undecided, surely this is your time. It's not about George Galloway. I mean, politicians, you can take or leave them. You don't have to like them. It's what they're going to do. And if you don't like George Galloway, you've got to give him your vote. You've got to lend him your vote because he's the best, not of a bad bunch. He's a good person. And amongst a sea of horrible people, and if you can get him, the people of Rochdale, if you can get him into Parliament, do you realise how it will place Rochdale on a map? Because the sea must turn, the people must see that the goodness has to stand. I mean, if you look at the Tories, the Labour, what they have done consecutively, look at what they've done at Palestine, what they've done to Rochdale, what they've done to Glasgow, they've destroyed it. Piecemeal, Tories, Labour, destroyed it. So people of Rochdale, give this man the chance, whether you like or not. It's not about liking someone, it's about what he can do. And you must know, the people who are detractors, you know fine well, this guy is the finest orator who can stand up and get things done. The hospital needs to be open. Your town needs saved. George is the man. Let's go for it, George. God willing, inshallah, you're the victor tomorrow, and hopefully speak to you soon.
God bless you, Tommy. You brought a tear to my eye, as people inevitably will have seen. Will I win? Well, 19,188 people have now voted. You've still got about 45 minutes to get your vote in. Nathan is in Seattle, in the United States, on Biden. Nathan, go ahead, sir.
Hey there, George. I wanted to congratulate you on running for office. I also wanted to disabuse you of the ability for us to get away from Joe Biden and the Democrats' agenda. Joe Biden will win, or the Democrats, his donors, will win. For the same reason, Nancy Pelosi would destroy you if she decided to go against you in Rochdale. A lot of people are saying she would own you in a debate. That's irrelevant. It's because she's well-funded, well-financed, and well-funded. And for us to really get past this whole belief that it's going to come from the top, our savior, we need one person. We need to understand the establishment. In this brave new world, we're the savages. Where some might see mismanagement, I see thieves in the night on some vandal shit. We're run by crooks who are scandalous, but if we unite, we can handle it. Ever since corporations ran this shit, we see why we should dismantle it. You see, wages of rights is vanishing, and if you speak the truth, you get the banishment. We need recalcitrance towards these candidates for us to do anything. So, so it's just like...
Well, very poetic,
Nathan.
Very poetic, and no, I'm grateful to you. Very poetic, but I'm still laughing inside at the idea that Nancy Pelosi would defeat me in a debate. You've obviously never heard me debate. Adam is in Pennsylvania, but on Palestine. Go ahead, Adam.
Mr. Galloway, I'd like to thank you for standing up for the Palestinians and helping them through the hard times. I appreciate your dignity and personality and bravery. You did what a lot of Arab states could not do, and I thank you, sir. And the Palestinians must be thanking you as well for that.
Sure. Yeah, if the Palestinians could vote in the by-election tomorrow, it would be a landslide.
Well, speaking of that, I am kind of oblivious to politics in the UK, but I wish you the best with everything you do, Mr. Galloway. I wish you the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
What's the situation in Pennsylvania? We've lost Adam. Not to worry. Will George Galloway win the Rochdale by-election?
I'm here, Mr. Galloway.
You're there. I wanted to ask you, Adam, the current political state of affairs in the state of Pennsylvania. How do you think they're going to vote in November? Do you think they'll turn out for Biden, or will Trump take that state?
Well, as you know, Biden is from Scranton, which is he was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and he has a bunch of supporters, but a lot of Pennsylvanians I see that they like Trump a lot. They do, I think. But I think Trump has a better chance in Pennsylvania, in my opinion. But again, I'm not into politics.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why I wanted to ask you. I think Trump wins Pennsylvania and he wins in Michigan, in which case Biden cannot possibly survive, at least without the midnight knock of the fraudulent voters. Look, the poll is overwhelming, but I still want more numbers. Will I win the Rochdale by-election? On Telegram, 96% say yes, 4% say no. On Twitter, 76% say yes, 24% say no. On the YouTube community poll, 88% say yes, 12% say no. And on the YouTube stream, it's 95% for me and 5% not. Get voting. You've still got 40 minutes, 45 minutes maybe, still to vote. Now, coming up after the break is the one and only Bryce Greene. He's an independent writer, political analyst, and contributor to Fairness. And boy, is he eloquent. Don't miss it right after this short break. You don't get to call me far right. You don't get to call me that on my own show. A lifelong socialist, the leader of a socialist party, the Workers' Party of Britain, with an Indonesian wife, with 5 mixed-race children, with a record of fighting racism all of my life, representing more people of colour in the British Parliament than anyone in history by a country mile. You don't get to call me far right. These kind of idiotic insults tossed around by infantile leftists who think that anyone to the right of them is a fascist, is a racist. They are the cause of the crashing and burning of what used to be called the left. They are the cause of it. They have discredited leftism with their foolish, idiotic isms and ists and smears that emanate from them like a bad smell.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go straight to Bryce Greene. He's always worth hearing from. He's a political analyst and a contributor to Fairness. He's an independent man, and that's the kind of man we like. Bryce, I was talking to Chris Hedges earlier about the meaning of the result last night in Michigan. Before we turn to the Middle East per se, what about its impact on the American presidential race? How do you analyze that yourself?
Well, it's very interesting. Even before this Gaza genocide started and Joe Biden started being even more unpopular, it was a really open question as to how voters were going to respond to the Biden re-election campaign. There were rumors about whether or not the Democratic Party is going to replace him with someone who's more popular, more likable, because even looking at the numbers, before October 7th, Trump was beating him head-to-head in many important states. And so the idea that people are surprised that Joe Biden is now so much less popular because of this devastating policy in Gaza, I mean, it's just frankly ridiculous. Voters have been signaling that they're unsatisfied with the status quo, both domestically and on foreign policy. But the party establishment in the U.S. of the Democrats really has a lot of disdain for the people that they consider to be their constituents. Even now, after this stunning result in which the uncommitted people turned out tens and tens of thousands of people in a key swing state, even after this, you still have Democratic Party officials talking about how it doesn't matter and how these people have nowhere else to go and how, well, they're going to have to, vote, suck it up and vote for Biden if they don't want a Trump term. That's really the only thing that they've been able to offer. That's the only thing that Biden has been able to offer his entire presidency. The idea that he's not Trump and that he's holding back the floodgates of something far worse. But voters are starting to get wise and understand that that's just pure rhetoric, that the Biden administration, like most of the Democratic Party, has very little to offer the general public in America, and even less to offer the people who care about human rights and peace and stability and justice around the world.
This lesser of two evilisms approach, I've never bought it, actually, ever, because I don't want evil to win at all. But it would be difficult to make the case that Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils in this case, wouldn't it?
It is certainly difficult. Now, on the domestic front, I think it's very easy to point out that even though the Biden administration has been a disaster, there are many policies, many agencies, regulations that have been significantly better than the Trump administration, and that can't be ignored. But the real question for voters is whether or not these domestic wins outweigh the foreign policy that the Biden administration has been pretty unrepentant about. The policy in Ukraine, for example, to push a country into war, to refuse to negotiate, and to escalate the war, causing an entire country to be destroyed, basically, that's not very popular with voters. And this idea of supporting a genocidal, ethno-nationalist, fascist regime in Israel, who clearly don't care about human rights, and the overt support for the genocide, well, that's not very popular with voters. And so if a voter is wondering about the question of whether or not Joe Biden is a lesser or two evil, well, they have to weigh. Are these domestic concerns in which he's slightly better than Trump, do those outweigh the devastating foreign policy that's gotten tens of thousands of people killed, threatening to kill many more, and he seems to have no breaks. He seems very committed to the policy that he's set on, and there don't seem to be any adults in the room, either in Ukraine or on the issue of Palestine. And so, will the Trump administration be worse? Well, that's, again, an open question. Domestically, like I said, there's no doubt that he'll be far worse than the Biden administration is, however bad he currently is. But on the foreign policy, well, it's an open question. Not to say that Trump is a peacemaker or a friend to the Palestinians, but he's certainly unmoored by some of the ideologies that govern the bipartisan consensus on foreign policy. People might forget this, but a few weeks before the October 7th event, Israeli papers actually reported that Trump had actually explored the idea of using leverage against Israel, using all the aid we have against Israel. Now, he was clearly talked down from that position. But the fact that he's not as ideologically committed to some of the sorts of things that the neocons and the bipartisan consensus are committed to, it might open new possibilities. Now, this isn't to be taken as an endorsement of Trump, mind you. I still think he's a dangerous character. But right now, the person pulling the trigger on all these dead Palestinian children is Joe Biden.
It's a paradox, isn't it? Chris Hedges was explaining that Netanyahu has nothing but contempt for Biden, is hoping that Trump will defeat him, and considers or treats Joe Biden as a kind of laughing stock, at least behind his back. And yet Biden seems to love him so much. What's the love affair between the Democratic Party and Israel all about?
Well, it's hard to say how much of that love affair is genuine admiration, genuine belief in the idea that Israel is the quote unquote only democracy in the Middle East, or how much of that is just genuine anti-Arab racism. But a sizable chunk of the relationship between the Democratic Party and the State of Israel and the lobby that represents the State of Israel domestically, a sizable chunk of that relationship comes from the sheer volume of power that lobby has. And it's not just the Democratic Party, of course. The Republican Party is just as committed to the State of Israel as the Democrats are. Congressmen from both parties alike have to fill out a form for AIPAC listing their positions on Israel. But the fact is that for most politicians, supporting Israel is the path of least resistance. They don't care about all the human rights that they'll talk about. They don't care about whether or not people are being bombed in the Middle East. They don't care about whether or not children are getting their limbs severed and scattered around the city block. They don't care about that. What they care about is how easy it will be for them to win re-election in the future. And once you have a lobby that's able to mobilize millions of dollars, that's able to mobilize phone calls and voters, well, then it makes it a pretty easy choice for someone, again, who's amoral and doesn't care about right or wrong. If they want a re-election, well, then they have to appease the lobby. Simple as that. And I think that is the largest single contributing factor to the ongoing support for Israel and the genocide that they are hell-bent on perpetrating.
Now, Biden said, whilst licking an ice cream, that there was going to be a ceasefire on Monday. Well, that's only a few days away. And the Palestinian resistance groups say they don't know what he's talking about. So does Qatar. Was it just idle chit-chat over a mint chocolate chip ice cream? Or does Biden know something the rest of us don't?
Well, Biden may know something the rest of us don't, but there's also an equal chance that Biden simply made it up or doesn't know what he's talking about or maybe heard something incorrect. I think we've all seen enough of his mental state to understand that some of the things he says may not be sanctioned by his staff or by his advisors or anything else. They're just off the cuff. He's got that old man syndrome going. But the interesting thing about the ceasefire discourse is that there's been a lot of propaganda going around. In fact, you just look at the New York Times recently. They'll talk about how Hamas has rejected a ceasefire offer. And that seems to be exactly what Israelis want Americans to be talking about, how Hamas has rejected a ceasefire offer. But if someone were to actually read the terms of the ceasefire offer or read the record about what Hamas has been offering and what Israel has been offering over the last 5 months, well, then it seems pretty clear that the labeling Hamas as rejecting the ceasefire is just pure propaganda. What Hamas rejected was an Israeli proposal that would temporarily pause the fighting and see the release of many hostages, but would guarantee that the fighting would continue and that Israel's assault on Gaza will continue. The very thing that Hamas has been trying to avoid since this entire conflagration began. On day 2, on October 9th, Hamas was talking about exchanging all the hostages in exchange for a ceasefire and a lifting of the illegal blockade around Gaza that has been going on for almost 20 years. But Israel rejected that. They've said explicitly over and over again that their goal has nothing to do with getting the hostages. It's about removing Hamas and removing any political leadership from the Palestinians so that they can, accept their subjugation without raising their heads. That's what Israel wants. And in fact, you've seen this if you pay close attention to the press.
You're breaking up, at least in my ear. Yeah, go on, Bryce.
Well, Netanyahu said days ago that even if a hostage deal was reached with Hamas, the Israeli forces would still go in to Rafah, where millions of people are sheltering and hospitals are being attacked. They're still undergoing bombs. But Netanyahu said that even if they give up the hostages, they're still going to bomb them. Well, what does that tell you? It tells you that they don't care about the negotiations, because obviously saying that would decrease Hamas's likelihood of actually coming to the negotiation table. But it also means that they don't care about the hostages in general. If they're willing to torpedo negotiations in order to fulfill their genocidal ambitions, well, then the hostages are very clearly just a PR tactic for American audiences, a talking point for Western media figures to justify Israel's brutal attack. But as I keep pointing out to people, Israel has killed more hostages than they've rescued. They've killed several by their own direct fire. Israelis who were shouting at soldiers in Hebrew, Israel killed them anyway. There have been reports, unconfirmed some of them, about Israel's targeting of the tunnels where these hostages lie. According to Palestinian sources, Israel's already killed several of the hostages underground. And it seems pretty clear that many of the hostages who were about to be taken to Gaza after October 7th were just mowed down by Israeli Apache helicopters. And so unless you haven't read all of this, or unless you're actively and willfully ignoring it, this idea of Israel waging a war to get the hostages is complete bunk. It's complete nonsense. They're waging a war of extermination, trying to rid the Palestinians of political leadership, trying to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians off their land, and implement a regime of ethno-supremacy from the river to the sea. That seems to be very clearly their goal, and they've written about it. We've even seen leaks from the Israeli intelligence ministry that said explicitly that the best option for everybody is to simply expel the Palestinians. And it's interesting because they said that this is the preferable option because it means that they'll have to kill fewer Palestinians. In other words, as far back as November, Israel, their plan was to kill as many Palestinians as possible in order to get them to leave so that they don't have to kill the rest of them. And that is why you won't see any serious talks about a permanent ceasefire from the Israelis. And that is why you're seeing headlines in the New York Times and other places about Hamas rejecting a ceasefire. You have to disinform the public if this charade is to continue. And that's what Israel's been doing.
It's going to be a hot potato, though, Bryce. Ramadan is just around the corner. Gallant, the defense chief, has said that the invasion of Rafah, a small town, by the way, but now with 1.9 million refugees in it, in tents, or living on the street. If a full-scale Israeli invasion of Rafah takes place during Ramadan, have the Americans any idea of the tumult that that will create and cause all over the Muslim world?
I think they do know. I think that many of them simply don't care. And the ones who do are powerless to do anything within the Biden administration. Again, the true cost of the Israeli assault on Gaza is unknown, but the numbers that we have paint a pretty clear picture. And, you know, Biden administration officials have access to the same internet, the same newspapers, the same YouTube that we all do. They know what's going on, and they know what other countries around the world are thinking about it. In fact, probably more than me or you. But they're still willing to continue this insane policy, which tells me that either that there are forces within the United States government who don't care about doing actual diplomacy, even if it is to maintain the evil empire, even if it is to maintain their influence around the world. It seems that this devotion to Zionism and this devotion to Israeli ethno-nationalist project has trumped even those concerns. And so that even if it means that every country in the world will view the U.S. as a undeniably rogue state, a terrorist state, and irredeemable pariah, they don't seem to care. They seem to be embracing it, in fact. You'll see all these headlines about how the world is standing with Israel, how the world is behind Ukraine, how the world believes in freedom and democracy. But what they mean by the world, of course, is some European countries, Australia, Japan, and the United States. If you look at the actual world and what the actual world thinks, one need only go to the United Nations to see what the world thinks. And the world has been trying to stop this war, not only since October 7th, but since 1948, the world has been trying to stop this war. And if you look at the UN resolutions trying to promote a just solution to the refugee crisis, trying to promote a Palestinian state, trying to promote what's essentially the international consensus on Palestine, every year there are a few outliers, and they're led, of course, by the United States and Israel. So that's the world. It's really the world versus these Western powers. And I think the American leaders, they understand that, and they don't seem to be doing anything to change that. They seem to be openly embracing it for better or worse. And one of the issues that isn't discussed much is just how much this policy, this insane, maniacal policy, could lead to nuclear war. Not only is Russia a nuclear power, and the U.S. is, provoking Russia. They provoke them into war, and they're continue to escalate in Ukraine, though that seems to be in question these days. But they're provoking a nuclear power. And Israel, of course, has nuclear weapons, even if the State Department chooses to bury its head in the sand and snicker at people when they ask questions about the Israel nuclear problem. They know that Israel has nuclear weapons, and they know that Israel is one of the single most rogue states to ever exist, other than the United States. And so creating a dangerous situation in that region, not only could it inflame the other countries, but it could also cause Israel to panic if something were to go outside of their plans, if something were to the minds of the Israeli officials and intelligence and military, in their minds, threaten the state of Israel, well, then nuclear weapons could be used. And it's very difficult to predict how that could end. But it should be the goal of any sane statespeople to avoid a situation like that from even arriving. But the Biden administration, the Blinken-led State Department, all of them, they seem to be just fully on board with endless escalation, just the same in Ukraine, and it seems to be the same here in the Middle East.
Bryce Greene, brilliant as ever. Thanks for joining us on the Mother of All Talk
Thanks for having
shows.
me on.
Quite brilliant. Tour de Horizon. Look, a quick break now, and then it is the one and only Richie Medhurst coming up next. On the line is a Rose in Texas. I was at the beginning of a song on Californication, which is a song. Rose, welcome to the show.
fan of the show, transgender fan of the show, and I wanted to briefly address your monologue from last week on Californication, because I almost entirely agree with what you said. Trans women athletes taking medals and records, directing children at nightclubs, and even going to elementary schools themselves, not to mention hormone blockers for children as well. The attack on freedom of speech, not only against conservatives, but anyone who doesn't fall in line with the agenda, rainbow flags on NATO military aircraft, which is certainly doing more to cultivate anti-queer sentiment around the world than there already is. All of that makes me sick. So because I don't believe in incest, bestiality, necrophilia, and pedophilia, I'm basically culturally right-wing by today's standards, even though less than 5 years ago, I'd still be left-wing. So in regards to you and everyone else watching who thinks of me and people like me as the villains right now, you should know that I support the most traditional Muslim, Jewish, Abrahamic believers to be as homophobic and transphobic as they want, because guess what? That's freedom of religion, which is a value we claim to have in the West. Now, my religion, I suppose, is I believe I'm a woman, but guess what? Not everyone has to convert to my religion. Otherwise, we basically have a theocracy, only this theocracy is for the ever-evolving LGBTQIA supercalifragilisticexpialidocious club. So that's all I wanted to get out of my system. Thank you.
Well, Rose, if I could put your call in a glass bottle and ship it around the world, I promise you that I would do so. Crystal clear, beautifully expressed, and I wish you every happiness in life. It is exactly what people who are transgender should be saying. And if they were, they would disappoint the liberal zealots who want to use them as a battering ram against the traditional family values of the rest of us. Beautifully expressed, Rose. I'll never forget it.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Blimey, Richard Medhurst is young to be called renowned, but that's what it says here on my screen, and that is, in fact, the truth. Richard Medhurst is an internet sensation, young but wise and brilliant and eloquent, and we're about to hear and see exactly that with Richard Medhurst, the independent journalist and political analyst. Let's start in the Middle East itself, though I want to talk to you, Richard, about the Assange case also. But as you are from the Middle East, as you are deeply involved in following and analysing what's happening, do you share my view that the sight of Egypt flying a plane across its own border with another territory and dropping aid into the sea that it could easily have driven through its own gate marks something of a new low in the conduct of Arab dictatorships?
Hi, George. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it is certainly a new low, and it's not just Egypt; it's Jordan as well that were dropping these aid packages, and dropping them into the sea. As a matter of fact, half of them anyway. We already know that Palestinians are under siege, so it's one thing to make a mistake. And mistakes happen all the time in logistics, and to drop it in the sea, but you can't go out and just get it with Israeli gunships pointed at the coast. And we all know, of course, the famous story of the boys who were playing football on the beach and got killed for no reason by the Israelis. So this is just one of many reasons why these pathetic performances are not just insufficient but life-threatening in and of themselves. And we know that Palestinians, they need 500 trucks of at least 500 trucks. And again, this is under siege before October 7th, coming into Gaza every day. And it's a very bad predicament that these Arab states have found themselves in when it comes to Jordan and Egypt, because the majority of the people there, they don't like their governments and their government's foreign policy, because they're completely intertwined with the West. I should also remind people that the King of Jordan is a colonel in the British Army. Now, being a colonel in the British Army is not necessarily the hallmark of evil by any means, but he is, he and his government are completely intertwined with the security state in Britain. And you can just see from their foreign policy that they do everything that Britain and America demand of them, which is to make sure that Jordanians cannot go and help people in Gaza or in the West Bank. And Egypt is the same thing. The people there, they want to help Palestinians, but the governments forbid them from doing so. And Netanyahu, there's no way that these planes flew and dropped these aid packages, if we can call them that, without Netanyahu approving that in the first place. It's just a very pathetic and sad performance, and doesn't even come close to nourishing and helping Palestinians for one day, never mind during an extended period of war and siege.
Yeah, how do they explain to their own people why they don't? I mean, Jordan at least doesn't have a border with the Gaza Strip, but Egypt does. It has sovereign control of the gate. How do they explain to their people why they don't just open the gate and drive the aid in?
Beats me, George. They come up with all sorts of excuses. We have to remember that there are two things involved when we talk about this gate in the Rafah crossing, because there's a difference between opening it for Palestinians to come into Egypt, because of course opening it for aid to go from Egypt into Gaza. And I'll explain the difference. The former is that were Palestinians to given the possibility, afforded the possibility of just leaving Gaza and going into Egypt, many would, of course, because it's a natural human response. It's a human instinct to simply want to survive. And how could we possibly blame them? But the reasoning behind this is that if they were to leave, and many of them refuse, Palestinians know, because most of the people in Gaza already lost their homes once to Israel. Were they to leave into Egypt, they would lose their homes forever. They're never going to see their land again, or what's left of it after Israel's slaughter and campaign of genocide. Now, on the other hand, how can you justify not sending aid into Gaza from Egypt? There's no risk of land being lost or things like that. There simply is no excuse. And even just to send in aid is it doesn't even come close to scratching the surface. What I ask myself and other people is that how is it that Iran, which is not even an Arab country, is doing so much to help the resistance, and Egypt, which is an Arab country, which is a Muslim country, which is literally on the border with the Palestinians, do nothing? I mean, it's truly incorrigible. I think it's high time that these governments that have betrayed the Arab people, that have betrayed the Palestinian people, they have to shape up or ship out. Simply put, they have to shape up or ship out. This is really a big curse, a big problem in the Arab world. Is that half the states were created by Britain and France, and they're being run by people appointed by Britain and France and America to serve Western interests. They don't serve Arab interests. So whatever possible excuses that they like to give, domestically, if they even do, they rarely even address these things. They're simply pathetic. They don't even. They're truly insulting, not just to the Palestinians but to themselves as well. When these leaders try and justify what's going on. I mean, how can you, after 4 months of this slaughter, 75 years of this slaughter, barely send in a bunch of boxes? That don't even come close to meeting Palestinians' needs? I would be ashamed of myself were I in their shoes.
I mean, Joe Biden said that there's going to be a ceasefire on Monday. Do you believe him?
Yeah. No, I don't believe him. And the fact he's announcing it over ice cream, I mean, honestly, I don't care if he's announcing it in the White House. It doesn't really make much of a difference, but it just shows you how, what a casual air he's taken about himself and this topic, as if he's talking about, going to a ranch to hang out with George Bush or something. He's committing genocide. This guy's a war criminal. So, they can stick as many ice creams as they want in front of his face and to try and make him look like a friendly grandfather. He's a war criminal. He has more blood on his hands than we can even fathom. And Joe Biden himself to this day proudly declares himself a Zionist. He says this. He knows what's going on in Gaza. He is lucid enough to understand this, that we cannot absolve him of responsibility for that. And he has been helping Israel for decades. He has spent decades in Washington doing precisely that. So this thing about a ceasefire, I don't believe him, because the Israelis know. We know that the Israelis want to continue prosecuting this war for various reasons. Netanyahu, for example, knows that the second the war is over, he has to ship out. The Israelis are going to get rid of him, and he's lucky he even got back into power a second time. That was, coming back from the dead like that was already a miracle once. He's certainly not going to survive this. They will put all the blame on him, at least domestically, and get rid of him the second the war's over. So he has an interest, a self-interest in continuing the war. Not to mention that when you look at the Israelis, the only thing that gets them rallied behind the prime minister is a good war. So they're also not too chuffed about it. And we know from polling that Israelis are actually in favor of this war. So it's not like they have any interest in stopping soon. And we should always remember that even if there's a quote unquote ceasefire, Gaza would still be under siege. How can you call that a ceasefire? A siege is death by another name. It's starvation by another name.
An act of war, yeah.
Right.
Now,
Absolutely.
Richard, I saw that you were speaking in the Strand. You were speaking outside the hearing in London for Julian Assange. You were reporting on it wonderfully well. As we now sit in this hiatus, awaiting the result of the appeal hearing, what's your current feeling? Optimistic or not?
No, I'm not optimistic, George, because this entire case shouldn't be happening. I mean, it's really a travesty for so many reasons. I could really sit here for hours and explain how scandalous this case is from top to bottom. Whatever way you look at this, Julian Assange's rights are being violated. The Americans want to punish him with US law and then at the same time deny him the First Amendment rights, which is really funny. If you look at the Council of Europe, the European Convention on Human Rights, which is the Human Rights Act in Britain, his rights are also being violated there. If you look at habeas corpus, I mean, this is a cornerstone of British law. His rights are being violated the second they threw him into Belmarsh prison. There's so much wrong with this case. The judges, they were a bit more engaging, and they seemed at least to be more interested than in previous times, because in previous hearings, what the judges would do is they would basically say nothing at all, or they would just make it, they would make their contempt for Julian Assange known and quite clear to him and the rest of the court. But this time they seem to be interested and ask the right questions. They asked, for example, the names in these publications that the Americans claim harmed their informants. Are these the same people that committed all these war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on? And the simple answer to that is yes, not every single one of them, but obviously these people are all working for the US in one way or another, upholding that regime and the war on terror prosecuted by the Bush regime and then subsequent administrations. So yes, they are involved in this system of torture, war crimes, and renditions that were inflicted by the Americans on the rest of the planet. The judges also asked, for example, whether Julian Assange would get the death penalty, and if the Americans can guarantee he won't get the death penalty. And I was quite shocked to see the US lawyers not even pretend to hide anything and say, no, they can't really guarantee he won't get the death penalty. And I should remind people, in Britain, it is illegal, it is a crime to extradite someone to a country where you know they will get the death penalty. This is completely forbidden. So the fact that I'm witnessing this in front of my eyes is really scandalous. And I should remind people that, whether you care about Julian Assange or not, and you should care, this case is the United States, basically grabbing the gavel of the judges and running the courtroom. These courtrooms, these hearings are not being run by a British judiciary. They're being run by the CIA, by the United States. So if you care about UK sovereignty, and you should care about UK sovereignty, we all should, We cannot accept that a foreign country, that's what the United States are. I know we have a special relationship with them, but they're still a foreign country, that they have so much power over our judiciary, especially one that calls itself committed to open justice, and it says it's democratic. So we should absolutely care about these things. The fact that they also were violating the Vienna Convention by threatening to go into the embassy back when he was in the Ecuadorian embassy, spying on him, spying on his conversations with his lawyers. I mean, any judge in the world would have thrown this case out from day one. It's a travesty that it's been allowed to go on for so long.
On the other hand, Richard, I think Joe Biden needs the sight of a journalist in chains arriving at Kennedy Airport in New York, like he needs a hole in the head. If anything, his problems are mounting so considerably. I'm not sure that he wants this to happen before November. And so the November deadline can be averted by allowing Julian the right to appeal. In other words, an apparent victory, but only because Biden doesn't want to face this right now. And then, of course, if the election goes the wrong way for Biden, well, Trump, who's Secretary of State when head of the CIA, was actually planning to murder Julian, Trump will be faced with the dilemma of whether or not to pardon Julian and bring this thing to an end. So whichever way you dice it, I have a feeling Julian's going to win, in the short term at least, a stay of execution, if I can call it that.
I mean, we should remember that the Trump administration, it's not just Mike Pompeo, it's also Trump himself that have prosecuted this case against Julian Assange. And that's one of the arguments that Julian's lawyers made in court. They said that this is not just the U.S. prosecutors doing their jobs. And as a matter of fact, they're not arguing that the U.S. prosecutors are doing their jobs in bad faith. They're saying that this is coming from the top, from the executive, that the Trump administration, both Pompeo and Trump, who've called for Julian Assange's death in various ways. I think Trump said that Julian should be given the death penalty. He said that in 2010. And then, of course, the Attorney General that he appointed, and then Mike Pompeo, his CIA director, they began this campaign. So, it wasn't just about this shootout in London that they had in mind. It's also about the legal method of murder that they have chosen to employ, because we should remember that having Julian jump back and forth between courts is killing the man. I mean, the last time that I saw him, which is about a year or 2 years ago, he looked really unwell, and it's quite heartbreaking, for someone who has spent the last 10 years in arbitrary detention. I mean, before Belmarsh, he was in the embassy. He couldn't even go to the dentist, for example, when he wanted to. So, his physical and mental health have really dwindled. The Biden administration, Biden had 4 years to drop the case and didn't. And he chose to continue not just the persecution of Julian Assange, but all of Trump's Middle East policies, attacking Yemen, keeping sanctions on Syria, keeping Lebanon in complete instability and basically strangling them with the IMF. Of course, the sanctions against Iran, and then he even used Trump's sanctions against Iran to shut down foreign press outlets. So they are so similar in many ways. They're indistinguishable, as a matter of fact. That I'm afraid to say that you're right. He might be given, Julian Assange might get a small victory. He might be afforded that in the short term, but afterwards they will continue this case because unfortunately we don't have leaders who are willing to stand up to them. Bit by bit, it's getting better. If you look at the Australian Parliament, for example, Julian Assange has so much more support today than he did 2 years ago, for example, and he's gaining more and more support internationally. But the leaders we have in Britain and the American leaders, they don't have the courage to stand up to the deep state, the CIA, and as a matter of fact, they play along with them. So they are complicit. And I would just remind people that the people bombing Gaza right now are the same ones that put Julian Assange in prison. They're the same banks, the same politicians, the same corporations. Palestinian journalists, 130 of them have been killed for exposing Israeli crimes. Julian Assange has been killed for exposing US war crimes. So we have to remember that there is a link between the two. There is a war on journalism. There's a war on civilians. And it's the same actors that are prosecuting these wars and continuing them with impunity. We have to remember that, and we have to demand not just that we free Assange, but that we free Palestine, and that these two things are intertwined and connected.
Brilliant. Richard Medhurst, thanks for joining us, as always, on the mother of all talk shows. Some YouTube comments now. Dot Testa says, Chris Hedges is an amazing national treasure to the world. His reports and speeches reduced me to tears on more than one occasion. And Fightback says, watch out those ballots, George, and who counts them? Yes, I'm mindful of that. Dinka Man says, young people of Rochdale, tell your parents, elders to vote for Gigi. He is a legend and always stood up for the oppressed. Thank you kindly for that. Era says, I think the wealthy Arabs should put forward AIPAC 2, the American Islamic Public Affairs Committee. Yeah, you wonder why they didn't think of that. Okay, back to the lines. In London is Yogi Max on Palestine. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, George. Thank you very much for taking my call. And yeah, I just wish you all of the best for Rochdale. We need somebody like you, not only in Rochdale, but in Parliament, to stand tall and speak the truth and, you know, try and shake it about a little bit over there. So all the best for that.
I will. Thank you. Thank you for that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've just got a comment about, you know, the ridiculousness of, you know, Joe Biden holding an ice cream and, you know, talking about a ceasefire, which is just as ridiculous as the two-state solution at this stage, you know, something that they've been trying to run with for quite a long time now. But I've just got a thought with regards to the two-state solution. Why don't they carve up America into two sections and take Israel into one of those states? Surely that would be the perfect two-state solution, though, and see how they like it.
Well, if there were, I mean, if there was a case for an ethno-religious state to be created, it should have been in Germany. That's the head of the snake that created the Holocaust, that murdered 6 million Jews and would have murdered the rest of them if the Red Army hadn't defeated the beast of Berlin and crushed him in the rubble. If there was a case for carving out any country, then it should have been in Germany. And the last place it should have been was on top of the entirely innocent Palestinian people. It is one of the gravest injustices in history, the wiping off the map of the ancient land of Palestine. But good call. Thanks a lot, Yogi Max. Ash is also in London, but wants to talk about Rochdale. We've really put Rochdale on the map. Ash, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, George. I haven't spoken to you for a couple of years. I think the last time was when you was on TalkSport. So, yeah, I mean, with regards to Rochdale, congratulations. To be honest, I think it's more or less in the bag for you, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. I was watching some news articles with regards to the what was going on in Michigan in terms of the uncommitted vote, and I just, you know, I thought it was absolutely brilliant on that side that people are actually coming together and kind of having their voices heard. And so I was actually writing a lot of the comments, right, okay, you know, you guys in the US have done your part, so we'll make sure we do our part by voting in you tomorrow in Rochdale. So yeah, so like, yeah, really just kind of giving you a call just to wish you the absolute best of luck. Yeah, I mean that was yeah. I mean that was really kind of the.
Well, God bless you. God bless you, Ash. But you're right, Ash, to identify what happened in Michigan with what is beginning to happen in Britain. You might say that the uncommitted 104,000 hardcore Democrats, registered Democrats, who refused to vote for Joe Biden, plus the hundreds of thousands that stayed at home, they are effectively the independents, like those that are emerging in the seats in London that I mentioned and seats I haven't yet mentioned. And our victory here will create a wave throughout the country which will encourage more and more people to be uncommitted to the Labour and Conservative parties. I thank you very much for your kind words, but of course I will not win unless every single supporter of mine does get out to vote tomorrow, and I encourage them to do so. Coming up next now is my good wife, Gayatri, who's elsewhere in the building. Gayatri, what's rattling?
Rochdale is rattling. You've seen the callers tonight from all over the world talking about Rochdale. Goodness gracious, talking about putting Rochdale on the map, the global map it is. And this is reflected in the commentaries as well. On Patreon, it's flooded with good wishes and compliments. Mariam says, "We need you to win, George. You are sanity in an insane world. You are fairness in an unfair world. You are truth when all those around us are lying. Go get them in Rochdale, George. PMQ will never be the same again." And Jason Cook says, I hope George sets a precedent in the UK. It's time for change. Labour and the Conservatives are one and the same. This is, of course, like what you just said to the caller before in London. We hope that this will inspire other places throughout the country, because one thing people need to remember, the UK is looking more and more like the US, like a two-party system, unlike the rest of Europe, where we have proportional representation.
Well, in your country, there's a pet lovers party in Parliament. There's a pensioners party in Parliament. There's all kinds of causes which, under proportional representation, can get some representation in the country's Parliament. But in our case, first past the post, usually the big money wins it. But not this time, I fear. Anyway, go ahead. Anything else?
Continuing on the subject, Mr. Bassett says, no-brainer, George Galloway all the way. Let's bring change to Rochdale and let's make this country great again. Wish you all the best, Mr. Galloway, and really hope you win. And Spike says he should win if it was the people's choice, but with all the corruption going on in politics today, then I'm very sad to say that he will probably lose to the higher funded and corrupted government we already have.
Well, you know, it took me many decades to even contemplate the possibility that elections might be rigged in Britain. Then I saw them in real time being rigged in the United States, and then I saw them in real time in the United Kingdom being rigged. So you can't rule it out. That's why we need a landslide victory. We need a victory so big that no one can dare to tamper with it. That's what we fought for. And that's what I hope that we get delivered tomorrow. And we'll know about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning whether we've done it or not. And we'll trumpet it to the world for sure. Last one for you.
Right, this is a very nice email from Nikki Solomon. I watched George's video from the 26th of February about Palestine and Ukraine. It's so exhilarating listening to George and his genuine passion about Palestine. And since the 7th of October, I have transformed myself from a GB News watching, Brexit cheerleading, indoctrinated fool into a left-leaning, pro-Palestinian 60-year-old woman. I have stopped reading newspaper and watching mainstream media because the indoctrination sickens me. Both political parties in this country are disgraceful. All the best of luck tomorrow with the by-election, George.
What a wonderful, wonderful message. Look, it's time to stop cutting down trees to provide newsprint for the bilge that is the mainstream press. It's time to switch off the fake news outlets online, on television. Really, we have to make our own media. You'll gain more from watching the Chris Hedges report, from watching Richard Medhurst, from watching the mother of all talk shows, than you will in 100 years watching ITV, the BBC, NBC, NBC, CNN, all these alphabet soups are all serving up the same dross. And it's bitter, it's tasteless, and it's there to deceive. The so-called mainstream media is now a lying machine. You've been with me. You know, every single journalist that walks in here, I know from the very first word that they've come there to lie, deceive, distort. None of them have any interest at all in the actual issues being fought here on the streets, hand-to-hand combat. None of them have any interest in those. They have an agenda, and their agenda is what pays their wages. Their agenda is the interests, the preoccupations, the prejudices, the bigotry of their owners. And they just lie. I mean, we've had papers come in here, write down everything that you say, appear to be nice as ninepence, and then go to their computer and write a tablet of lies about the conversation that they have just had with you. So I'm done with the media. If I win tomorrow night, Gayatri, the mainstream media can go whistle for any further conversations with me. I'll be having my conversations with the public here on the mother of all talk shows. They could go to hell. I could actually put it more roughly than that, but I shan't. As you know, I'm a gentle kind of guy. You got anything else that I should hear, or will I press on now?
Well, no, just very quickly, of course, we've had lots of friends coming over from all over Scotland, London. Imran is one of them. Scouselar is the other one from Liverpool. A win for George is a win for Rochdale and a win for decency. After myself visiting Rochdale today, it's plain to see George and the Workers' Party is in the ascendancy here. So wish you all the best. And with you back in Parliament, George, the political class won't know what has hit them. There you go.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I was hated in Parliament before by the mainstream parties. It doesn't trouble me. It would trouble me if they liked me. It would be a badge of dishonor if they liked me. I was always a lone wolf in the almost 30 years I spent in Parliament. I didn't go to the bars because I don't drink alcohol. Most of them were never out of the bars. I spent most of my time either in the chamber or in the library, where I would often find Mr. Tony Benn and the late Mr. Michael Foote also. We used to sit in a corner and read in the library. It's a wonderful library. Everybody that works in the House of Commons library has to be a PhD. You can ask them any question, and they'll go to the ends of the earth to find the answer. So the ire of my parliamentary colleagues will not trouble me at all, because if we win here tomorrow, they have to concentrate their minds that only 200 days from now, maximum, they're going to have to face their people. And their people are going to be saying, well, if Galloway can do it in Rochdale, then we can do it in other places too. So instead of jeering and booing me as I rise to speak from Monday onwards, if I win, they'd be better looking to their own prospects in facing their own people in the elections not far distant. I say 200 days. It might only be 100 days. It might only be 30 days. So let's you and I not get used to being back in London, because we have to fight a general election quite soon also, and we're going to fight it hard, and we intend to win it. Thank you, Gayatri, for that social media roundup. Talos says a GG win will turn Tobias Elwood to drink. You'd have to know Big Toby Elwood to know just how funny that is. Carpe Diem says, I was so excited about Cornel West when he announced on June 6th, 2023, and he hasn't done a damn thing since. I'm sorry to say that's kind of true. Back to the lines. Let's go to Leeds and talk with Mohammed. Mohammed, welcome. What would you like to say?
Good evening, George. My name is Mohammed Iqbal. I'm calling from Leeds. It's a privilege and great honor for me to speak on your show. And this is, I would like to say that this is an extremely significant time in the human history. The furious struggle between the forces of good and evil is, George, perhaps reaching to its climax. And I would also like to say that, George, you are doing a great job. Millions of people around the world appreciate, and we are really thankful for your extraordinary efforts and integrity to protect the human rights of Palestinians and others around the globe and for peace in the world. The Rochdale by-election tomorrow is the center of attention on both sides of Atlantic, and a big majority of people, especially we Pakistani community, pray for your success in these elections, George. And George, Rochdale seat is actually the starting point of a new era of your great struggle, and this struggle when will it's reach to its climax, and it will reach to the Westminster, and one day you will be thundering as the British Prime Minister, inshallah, in the Parliament, George. Tomorrow is a very significant day, and we all especially the Pakistani community, we have to prove our solidarity, resolve, determination, and our voice for weak and oppressed people. And George, I would like to take this opportunity because I believe that, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of Pakistani audiences watching this show. I would, if you allow me to, only for 3 or 4 minutes, I would like to say a few words in my own language to my community in Urdu, if you will. Let me speak in Urdu.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead briefly, Mohammed. Yeah.
Yeah. मेरे दोस्तों, भाइयों, बुजुर्गों, रॉचडेल के दोस्तों, आप सब मेरी आवाज़ सुन रहे होंगे। इस वक्त मैं लीड से बात कर रहा हूँ। मुख्तसरन मैं ये बात कहना चाहूँगा कि कल का दिन जो है बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट दिन है, बहुत अहम दिन है, और कल हम लोगों ने कल अपनी पूरी जो मेहनत है उसका जो फल है, उसका जो फ्रूट है वो हमको कल मिलने वाला है, और हमने अपनी मेहनत में कोई कसर नहीं छोड़नी। हमारा वोट सिर्फ जॉर्ज गैलोवे के लिए होना चाहिए। ये एक आदमी है जो बोल रहा है और जुल्म के सामने खड़ा हुआ है ये चट्टान की तरह। अब ये हमारी इज्जत का इम्तिहान है, ये हमारे ईमान का इम्तिहान है। हमने इसको वोट देना है और इंशाल्लाह हम इसको कामयाब करना है। एक मुसलमान की हैसियत से हमारा ईमान है कि इज्जत और जिल्लत सिर्फ खुदा के इख्तियार में है। अल्लाह ताला ने कुरान पाक में फरमाया, बाद औज़ु बिल्लाहि मिनश शैतानिर रजीम, व तुइज़्ज़ु मन तशा व तुज़िल्लु मन तशा बियदिकल खैर इन्नका अला कुल्लि शैइन क़दीर। इज्जत और जिल्लत अल्लाह ताला के इख्तियार में है। हाँ, हमने अपनी मेहनत में कोई कसर नहीं छोड़नी। हुजूर से पूछा गया था कि हुजूर सबसे बड़ा जिहाद क्या है? क्या फरमाया? जालिम के सामने खड़े होकर हक की बात करना सबसे बड़ा जिहाद है। इस दौर में इनके सामने, इनके मुल्क में बैठकर जो हक की बात कर रहा है वो ये शख्स बात कर रहा है जिसका नाम है जॉर्ज गैलोवे। इसने उनके सामने जो बातें की हैं, ये वाहिद आदमी जिसने बातें की हैं, ये वो लोग हैं, खियर स्टामर जैसे लोग, ऋषि सुनक जैसे लोग, जिन्होंने पूरी बेशर्मी के साथ जिन्होंने कहा है कि बिल्कुल उनके साथ जो जुल्म हो रहा है सब कुछ जायज़ है। कियर स्टामर ने पूरी बेशर्मी के साथ कहा कि वो जो गरीब लोग हैं, मजलूम लोग हैं, जो फ़लस्तीन के लुटे पिटे बेचारे मारे हारे कूटे हुए लोग, उनके ऊपर उसने बेशर्मी के साथ कहा, टीवी पर बैठकर उसने ऑनलाइन कहा उनके ऊपर बिजली बंद कर दो, पानी बंद करना जायज़ है, बिजली बंद करना, गैस बंद करना, फूड बंद करना, उनके लिए दवाइयाँ बंद करना जायज़ है। आपने और हमने कल उसको शो करना है, हमने उसको शीशा दिखाना है कल इंशाल्लाह। हमने उसको शीशा दिखाना है कि तुम्हारे जुल्म के सामने जो इंसान डट कर खड़ा हुआ और जिसने हक की बात की और जिसने गरीबों और कमजोरों और मजलूमों की हिमायत की, वो है जॉर्ज गैलोवे, और हमने इसको वोट देना, हमने इसको कामयाब करना है। अंधेरे में चिराग है, ये रोशनी फैला रहा है, इस चिराग को बुझाने के लिए कोशिशें हो रही हैं, लेकिन आपको याद होगा अल्लामा इकबाल ने सदियों पहले, कई सौ साल पहले अपने जवाब शिकवा में फरमा गए अल्लामा इकबाल कि नूरे खुदा है कुफ्र की हरकत पे खंदाजन, नूरे खुदा है कुफ्र की हरकत पे खंदाजन, फूंकों से ये चिराग बुझाया ना जाएगा। ये चिराग कोई नहीं बुझा सकता इंशाल्लाह। ये चलेगा, इसी तरह चलेगा, जलेगा और इसकी रोशनी में इजाफा होता रहेगा। और आप ये ना भूलें कि ये रोचडेल की गलियों से ये जो काफिला चला है, इसने ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट तक पहुंचना है। ये जॉर्ज गैलोवे जो आज शेर की तरह रोचडेल की गलियों और चौराहों में धाड़ रहा है, इंशाल्लाह एक दिन ये ब्रिटिश प्राइम मिनिस्टर बनकर ये वेस्ट मिनिस्टर में धाड़ेगा। और सिर्फ हम जॉर्ज के परस्तार नहीं, पूरी दुनिया इसकी दीवानी है। दुनिया में लाखों करोड़ों लोग इसकी दीवाने हैं। सदियों पहले शेख सादी फरमा गए थे, नमन तनहा दरी में खाना मस्तम, जुनेद व शिबलियो अतार शुदमस्त, बरूए पाक शमसुद्दीन तबरेज के मुल्ला बरसरे बाजार शुदमस्त। हमने इसको कामयाब करवाना है इंशाल्लाह। अब ये बात आपके ईमान, कल आपके ईमान का इम्तिहान है।
God bless you, Mohammed, for that. I don't know what happened. I was about to ask you to wind up and say what an extraordinary night it has been. We've had callers talking in Arabic. We've had callers talking in Urdu. We've had callers talking American English. And now we're about to have someone talking in Scottish, Irish English. It's our old friend Caroline from Coatbridge on Egypt. It's the mother of all talk shows, that's for sure. Caroline, last call, I think. Go ahead.
Good evening, George. I'll speak extremely slowly for the non-Scottish people, and I'll explain. Vodafone is a company in Europe, right? A mobile phone company. My network was down, my broadband. I got connected to Egypt. I asked the person, a gentleman, which country are you from with your accent? He explained Egypt. And I asked him why the Egyptian people are not marching like the people in Scotland, right, and the people in Ireland. Literally, he was in tears. And he said about the conversation that we were having, he would be put in prison. I said, I'm only explaining to you 5.5 million people in Scotland, right? 76,000 are Muslim, which is 1.4%. Every march that I have been to, over 90% look like me, white. I couldn't tell you what the religion is, but they look like me, white. And when I told them about Ireland and the ICG, right, he was so humbled, right, and he said that he would be arrested if he went out and marched for Palestine. I asked him, why can't you just go in to where the border is and give the Palestinian people aid? We ended up speaking for 90 minutes. He was so humbled, right, that people in Scotland, right, and when the London people tell me with all due respect, we have 2 or 3 times population, and I said what Rab C. Nesbitt said, Glasgow's greatest scumbag, right? It's not about quantity, it's about quality. So when they blame the Islamists on being terrifying, it's terrifying to the English people. What about in Scotland? Right, there's no Islamophobic and all that nonsense. If people that want to march Israel,
I don't know. I don't know about that, Caroline, but that was a wonderful anecdote. I only hope it wasn't you that paid for the 90-minute telephone call to Egypt and Vodafone. What a beautiful call. Carol is the last caller. She's from Swindon, and we need to hear her. Carol, welcome. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No problem. Hiya, George. I just thought I'd let you know that I was born in Rochdale 3 years after you was born in Scotland, and I found you a song for tomorrow night, and it's called Vigilante, and the band's called Magnum, and I just wanted to read you quickly the chorus because I thought it was wonderful.
Okay.
And it says, go call the vigilante, he'll turn this place upside down. Go call the vigilante, he don't get kicked around. Hold on, there's a new way a coming. looks like it's arriving tonight. There's no more hiding or running. There's no more walking on ice. Because you are the vigilante, George. And I want to be proud from being at Rochdale. I come there, that's my town. I was born there. I've been away a while, so I'm not quite as strong an accent, but it's there, the twang. But go get them, George.
I could tell
Rochdale
your accent, and I can tell, God bless you, Carol, that was from the heart. The people in Rochdale speak from the heart. I have no intention of leaving this town. Win or lose, I'm here. I'll be here for the local elections in May. I'll be here for the general election. Who knows, I might even be here for the general election after that, if my wife and children will allow me. But a contract is what I'm looking for. Look at me like, I don't know, Ronaldo, coming to the end of his career, but ready to sign a 5-year contract for Rochdale. It's been marvellous, truly mean that, right up to the last beautiful call from Carol in Swindon. But every call, every guest has been outstandingly good. I've run over by 6 minutes. I'll pay the penalty for that, but it's been marvellous. I hope to see you in a new hat on Sunday with the mother of all talk shows at 7 p.m. If you pray, pray for me.